Yes, guys, so Dana White is finally making his big move into boxing, and he looks serious. He's teaming up with His Excellency boxing kingpin, Turkey Al-Sheikh, with all the millions and billions that come along with it. They say that they plan to tear it all down and have one belt to rule them all. The question is, can he really do it? And how long before the IBF, the WBC, and the WBA start fighting back? Do you really think they're going to take this lying down? Dana believes that with the power and allure of the Ring magazine behind him, he can make boxing like the UFC. He's got the backing, he's got the track record of producing magic with the UFC, but boxing is a different animal altogether. This is essentially sports. And before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel to get involved with more stories like this one. For years, Dana has been talking about getting into boxing. Now it's finally happening. His ultimate plan is to scrap all the existing belts, as we say, and bring everything under one division. So we've got one champion per weight class, just like we see in the UFC. On paper, I have to say this is a brilliant idea. I, for one, have issues with boxing. I, for one, believe that yes, boxing is broken. Boxing does need fixing. I am tired of seeing the inability of the boxing fraternity to make the biggest fights. Fighters in their prime need to fight. And so often what we see is all the nonsense, all the politics, all the talking means that we don't get to see the best fight the best when they're in their prime. Prime example of this, Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. They were never able to make it happen. It would have been epic. Battle of Britain, one of the greatest heavyweight fights of all time. It would have made millions. So yes, boxing does need fixing, but can Dana really do it? Can he pull this off? There's a reason why it's so difficult to make these fights. And you can't just get rid of the WBC green belt. You can't just sack them off. That belt is one of the most prestigious and has one of the most rich histories in all of combat sports. You cannot just sack it off, Dana. UFC, the WBC, IBF, and WBA, they can deal with the old promoters. We're gonna do this differently. I mean, as we mentioned before, it's not just Fury versus Joshua. What about Mayweather-Pacquiao, one of the biggest boxing fights of all time? That came too late. It should have happened years earlier. Elsewhere, Crawford versus Spence. And one thing you would say about the UFC, generally speaking, we do get to see the best fight the best. We have in the past seen some epic battles, although, is far from perfect. We should have seen McGregor fight Masvidal in 2019, for example. Why did that fight never happen? Would have been huge. The bottom line, though, if Dana can bring his UFC model to boxing, the fans are gonna love it. It should be clear. We should have the champion. We should have a #1 contender. We should have rankings. And if you reach to the top of the rankings, the fight that everybody wants to see, the fight that the fans are hungry for, well, that's the fight that needs to get made. So, if Dana's able to pull it off, fans are going to go nuts. They'll love it. So, how does Dana plan to fix things? To give one blanket description of what is wrong with boxing: politics, egos. You can't get the fights made that you want to see, and the fans are the ones that lose out. And one thing you have to say, why Dana might be able to make this work: His Excellency Turkey Al-Sheikh. The man has revolutionized boxing. He is getting it done. He is a serious individual. Since he has come into the game, we have seen a marked improvement in the sport, and we have seen with Riyadh season some absolute stone cold bangers getting made. So the fans have their criticisms of the UFC. The fans love a lot of the UFC. Ultimately, what we want is action. Blockbuster fights, great matchups, no tune-ups. The people who deserve the shot at the title get the shot at the title. There's no messing about. Everything is clear. Again, much easier said than done. Let us know what you think. comment below, guys. Give us a follow. What about the existing champions that already hold these belts? Do you think they're just going to step across and want to compete in Dana's new organization? Maybe. Look, maybe. If there's enough money on the table and the prestige is there, that's the thing. Now, when we talk about checks and zeros, we have to address the elephant in the room: fighter pay. Ryan Garcia has already said, if you pay us what you pay MMA fighters in the UFC, we're not gonna like it. And he's not the only one that's been saying this. Dana White is famous for underpaying his fighters. Look at somebody like John Jones. When he fought Cormier in the rematch, he was getting $500,000. Now, one of the greatest of all time, one of the marquee names in mixed martial arts, if he's getting $500,000, compare that to the tens of millions that the likes of Canelo or Tyson Fury make in their fights, and there is a marked and significant difference. Even now, for example, John Jones is only making $2 million guaranteed, and that is still less than what a mid-level boxer would make at a top promotion. So there is a huge discrepancy here. This could be an issue. It's one of the major reasons why people doubt Dana and his move into boxing. Right, so what about the timing of all this? I've seen a bunch of different videos and commentators basically say that the UFC is dying. Now, this is anecdotal, right? Because they're still killing it in terms of revenue. The UFC makes so much money. Dana White is a master marketer. He knows what he's doing when it comes to selling a product that people will watch. But I'm sure you guys watching, you've watched the UFC for years, right? And I'm sure you'll agree, the UFC has lost some of its sparkle in terms of stars. You know, your Anderson Silvas, Chuck Liddell, Conor McGregor barely fights anymore. When was the last time you saw him compete and win? John Jones, we barely see him compete anymore. Jorge Masvidal retired. Yes, he might come back, but you know, the man's gotten older. What other stars can you think of? Ronda Rousey went off to WWE. Who are the big draws in MMA? Alex Portan Pereira is 38 years old and just lost his title. All the real bankable stars, all the really exciting guys or girls, they're not around anymore, or they got old, or they're coming towards the end of their career. This lack of stars is a major problem for the UFC because Dana White has a history in boxing. He was involved in the sport early in his career, and he's talked about getting back involved and getting into it many times over the years. Why now? But is even Dana starting to get a little bit bored of the UFC and wanting a new challenge? Or does Dana, knowing that the UFC is under the TKO banner with the WWE, is he feeling the pressure to add something fresh, to get new eyeballs onto TKO? Is the UFC alone just not cutting it? These are all questions worth asking. But can this work? Well, the involvement of Saudi Arabia. Just look at the track record of Saudi and His Excellency. They put on fights like Fury versus Ngannou, Joshua versus Usyk. These were absolute bangers. These were huge successes. And with Saudi involved, you know that there's going to be top-tier purses as well as top-tier promotion. With Turkey by his side, Dana might just have all the ingredients he needs to make this work. And look, let's check out history. When Dana came into the UFC, it was a scattered mess. It was not the mainstream product we see today. It was lambasted by the mainstream media as a blood sport. It was far from the general public eye. What did he do with it? Well, he turned it into a multi-billion-dollar industry and one of the most successful mainstream sports in the world. UFC. Everybody has heard of those three letters, and a large part of that is thanks to Dana White. He made superstars in the UFC. He made millions and millions of dollars while he was at it. If he can do the same with boxing, he might just pull this off. In recent years, we've seen a lot of crossover between MMA and boxing. It can be fun if you get the matchups right. That being said, I've got no interest in seeing Usyk versus Alex Pereira. None. I want to see Usyk fight the best boxers in the world. Personally, I think he would school Pereira, let's be honest. My question is though, will the boxing purists accept what Dana is trying to do? And that brings us to our conclusion. If it was so easy to fix boxing, would someone not have already done it? Is Dana White the man perfectly placed to actually pull this off? Let us know in the comments. This is Essentially Sports. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate your support, and it's time to grow and take this thing to the next level. Much love. We'll see you at the next one.